Okay, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share with you the information I have about the current state of the integration of Canada with the United States and with Mexico into unified North America. Let's be very clear that first of all, this is not a project under discussion. This is not a matter people are sitting around and negotiating as to whether or not it's to be done. The integration of Canada, the United States, and Mexico is currently happening. It's in process and on track, according to the language of the people who are doing this. So any organization or other political party, a couple of whom are starting to say some things, but they talk about we want the opportunity to be involved in the negotiating. There's no negotiating. The position has to be very clear. We have to say this must stop. We don't want the integration. First of all, let me just back up and tell you where I'm coming from, why I know about this integration. There are documents available that I was able to access. Anybody can access. Every single political elected person in our currently sitting in Parliament and in our legislatures have more resources than I have to get this information. Here's a document called New Frontiers, Building a 21st Century Canada-United States Partnership in North America. It's a discussion paper of the Canadian Council of Chief Executives dated April 2004. And they comment in here that they recognize, though it's to be a tripartite arrangement, any of the three can focus on just bilateral kind of things to start with, and they acknowledge that the best two countries to work with for the implementation is Canada and the United States. Now, you have to go back earlier in time to the project of North American Century, which is not put out by our Canadian Council of Chief Executives, but it's a document that's referred to in a video called Terror Storm, which is a video about the incident of 9/11. And that document, the Project for North American Century, clearly spells out the intention of an elite group of people who function in North America for the most part, but who have a desire and a design that North America has to be created into a power bloc to be able to compete effectively with the power bloc of the European Union or the power bloc of emerging Asian countries. Of course, everything about all the wars that have been going on that the United States has started and that Canada is now totally complicit with are all about squelching the power of the Middle Eastern bloc in terms of power of the world. It's not different now than it ever was in history that leaders, individuals, groups of people have the power bug and they want to control everything. History is full of it. 'Twas ever thus. But over time, from time to time, century after century, decade after decade, there was a resistance against the control of the world, an amassing of the resources of the world in the hands of a few, a resistance by the people, and always the people have won. So the first thing I want to say right now, before I forget, is that as you learn more about the extent of the integration into a region that's dominated by the United States and its aggression and its exploitation of the resources for an elite few, don't succumb to saying it's already happened, it's too late, there's nothing we can do. Because it's never, never, never too late. Never was in history and never will be. And of course, we realize that when people have had to struggle off those power brokers throughout history, sometimes it's had to be done by awful revolutions where a lot of people suffered terribly. I'm saying to the people in Canada, and whoever else might want to listen anywhere else, because some of my stuff is being broadcast elsewhere, but especially in Canada, we still have a lot of time if we become informed and if we work together to stop this total oppression of us and the return of us to a form of feudalism and a form of slavery. We still can do it. And we can do it because though the implementation is happening, the implementation has its problems, because one of the mechanisms, for example, in Canada, that slows down the implementation is our existing laws that we developed over many years of protection of privacy. We have privacy commissioners who are holding back some of the integration that's happening, for instance, in the health area, who are preventing some of the assimilation, some of the integration, some of the transmission of personal data because of privacy concerns that we have in existence in Canada over years. We decided that was important. And so I just want to say to you that though the implementation is moving rapidly, there are still mechanisms, there is still a philosophy, there is still an attitude, there is still an ideology, not only amongst the citizens, but amongst many of the organizations who have delivered services, that they still accept and believe in the concept of a public good, the concept of a protection of the citizenry, the concept of an entitlement to consumer protection. So don't go away from here or from anything you watch somewhere else feeling that there's nothing you can do. There is much that we can do. So let me go back to talk about this paper that was put out by the Canadian Council of Chief Executives. And these are the people who pride themselves on the fact that they were the instrumental leaders that propelled the governments, in our case in Canada, working with their counterparts in the United States, the Council on Foreign Relations, to bring us NAFTA. And you have to understand that what we're facing now with the integration of North America is simply an extension of the principles that went with NAFTA. And realize we're not just talking about integrating ourselves into being absorbed by the United States. We're talking about a different apparatus for all of the North American region. And it's not going to be a political arrangement. So you will hear the leaders in the various countries, and especially in Canada, where our leaders are really deceiving us much more severely than is happening even in the United States, and I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But when they say that it's not happening, it's very important to realize that this Canadian Council of Chief Executives acknowledges the work that's been going on incrementally in Canada for decades. And it's very important to acknowledge that it's all related to the concept of globalization, corporatization. It's a worldwide phenomena. It's an intention and an agenda to have everything moved someplace, in some central places, probably under the United Nations, with the police force probably dominated by the will of the United States, where there will be one group who runs the world, exploits the resources of the world, and the people will be useful only insofar as they deliver the profits to the corporate elite of the world. The people, the Canadian Council of Chief Executives, talk about the fact that they don't want a political union, and so when our leaders say, no, there's no North American Union happening, it's all the conspiracy theorists out there, these crazy, these nutbags. Yet you can go right to the documentation that tells us what's going on. The reality, let's be very clear about the concept here. They specifically want and intend and are implementing a governance process which is designed on the NAFTA model, which is an administrative panel, the administrative groups, an administrative mechanism for effecting the decisions, for effecting the rules, for effecting the policy. This has been the problem, one of the problems with NAFTA. We had no way as people to be able to have a say in what was going on in the dealings that had to do with the exploitation of the resources in North America. And even our courts haven't been able to deal with some things from the NAFTA practices because the laws under NAFTA are outside our local jurisdiction, our local laws, and some Supreme Court of Canada decisions have said we can't do anything about that NAFTA challenge because we have no jurisdiction there. So be very clear that it's a very clever process here to move the structure out of our existing domestic legal apparatus and frameworks where the people have a say. It's not to be a North American country with a particular new name, because that would mean it's a new nation, and as a nation that would mean there would be a government, and if there's a government that's a democratic government, that would mean the people would have a say. That would mean there would have to be accountability to the people. That would mean there would have to be some representation to the people. We all know we're very unhappy with our existing system of government because it's moved so far away from democracy and its representation of the people and its accountability of the people. We already know we have big problems there, so we have to change that. But this new structure won't even play with a pretense at democracy, because they've moved it all out into an administrative structure which is totally away from your and my capacity to say, I don't want that, or I want to talk about it. I want to know what you're planning. I want to have a say. So when Prime Minister Harper or former Prime Minister Martin or anybody in the Liberals or anybody in the Conservatives or anybody anywhere, anybody in the Canadian Council of Chief Executives says, oh, no, 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 it's not happening. It's true, they're not giving us a new nation. But what is true is they're totally castrating 3 nations, because they are removing incrementally, progressively, the apparatus that was the structure and the substance of the meaning of a nation: Canada, United States, or Mexico. Areas of defense, areas of immigration, areas of foreign policy, areas of finance, of sovereignty over your money, areas of immigration, areas of health. All of that is currently massively being changed, bit by bit. You don't, and they talk about the necessity of the success of Canadians' way of doing this incrementally as being really the only way right now, because if the people really knew what was going on, there would be massive rebellion. We would get rid of every single person that currently sits in Parliament so fast they wouldn't know what hit them. And I'm simply saying to the people, all of us have got to wake up and realize we have to say that to all of those people, because none of them, not one of the parties who sit in there, are exposing this stuff. The Canadian Action Party is a small party that exists to be a voice, to be able to speak out. And we have a legitimacy precisely because we can still do that in this country. And that legitimacy has been recognized by our Supreme Court of Canada for all the small parties. And yet we're squeezed out by the rules that they make in terms of changes to financing. We can no longer have a person that gives us $100,000 or $1 million. It can't even give us 5 anymore. It's down to 1,100. We can they won't give us the $1.75 per vote that the government turned around and gave to the major party, unless if you get 2% of the vote, you can get it. So it's a way of squeezing the dissenting voice. Our anti-terrorist laws, which came into effect after 9/11, do very, very much to criminalize dissent. But I'm simply saying to everybody, though the law stands there on the books to really oppress us, it hasn't been fully effected. It's implemented but not fully effected. There are many things that we still can do, much we need to think about, much we need to talk about. In the United States, there's some good work, really good work happening in the United States. I'm abysmally appalled and ashamed in Canada that this tiny little party, the Canadian Action Party, which is boycotted and blackmailed and blackballed all over this country, is not allowed a voice. Even a major teach-in that happened in Toronto, we were excluded from talking. Our voice, our message didn't get there. The NDP voice and the Green Party voice did, and those two parties are extremely weak. They talk about negotiating. They talk about letting us in on the discussions. And it's really important also to realize that the civil society, as it's called, non-governmental organizations, there's a split there in the world. I've been active in this domain for 20 years. There's a split between those who want to go in, not just dissent, but attack and remove the globalization, get rid of it, end it, turn us back to sovereignty within nations for people controlling themselves, their areas for themselves, and making arrangements of trade and dealing with others according to the interests of their people. That split is compared with the other half of the non-governmental organization, of which I don't know one other Canadian non-governmental organization that isn't in this half, and that's a half that says, we want to be the power for the people. We want to be up there sitting with the big movers and shakers of the world to be the voice of the people. Governments are now irrelevant. Corporations have all the power, and non-governmental organizations are the surge for the people. my view is, and I say, I don't think so. I believe in democracy. I believe in a vote. I believe in a say. People have died for the franchise. I want a right to be able to throw somebody out if they don't do what I want. I want a right to say what's going to happen. I want a right and a capacity and a mechanism of shaping the direction and the policy, all in the interest of humanity and of human beings. So that's an important distinction to remember. So when whoever in Canada is talking, and what I started to say in the United States, there's a lot of pressure happening coming up from Congress, representatives from Congress, some mainstream media like Lou Dobbs, many really excellent alternative media. And I've been on a number of United States high-profile talk shows. Unfortunately, some Canadians listen to those. It's the only way I'm really getting my voice across Canada. They're really getting the information out to the people. And so the people are really beginning to ask questions and fight back. And so in the United States, there's a move where they're saying, oh, well, there really isn't a security and prosperity agreement that's been signed. There's no signed on the dotted line. It's not an agreement. It's not really happening. It's not like that at all. Well, that is another lie. This document of 2004 set out the program of the Canadian Council of Chief Executives, and I have a list of all the players in that, and we're not going to have much time. We're only 20 minutes in to set them out to you. There's the press release that went out in March 23rd, 2005, that came out of Waco, Texas, when former Prime Minister Paul Martin was there with Bush and with Fox, releasing the fact, it's called the Attached Leaders Statement and Companion Security Agenda and Prosperity Matter, announcing the establishment of this partnership of North America, were released today at the conclusion of Prime Minister Martin's meeting with the United States, Bush and Fox from Mexico. And it says this: we, the elected leaders of Canada, Mexico, and the United States, gather in Texas to announce the establishment of the Security and Prosperity Partnership of North America. Doesn't that sound like a big-time agreement to you? And another thing to watch about, I want to be very clear on this because we're facing an election. It's happened to us before that everybody amasses around the Liberals because they're afraid of the Conservatives. There's a really important something else I have to read to you quickly. In this document of the Canadian Council of Chief Executives from 2004, it points out that the Liberals and the Conservatives are the same. Over the year, there has been an explosion, and this is Thomas D'Aquino, by the way, who's a spokesperson from the Canadian Council of Chief Executives. There has been an explosion of research and discussion about options for North America. The intensity of the discussion has been greatest in Canada. Well, you and I haven't been talking about it. But it's the officials in our government, it's industry in our government, and it's leading political figures. In the back room. And then he goes, this article, and this is D'Aquino, they're setting this out. While this is 2004, before the 2004 election, we have had 2 elections since then. While the 2004 will bring elections in both Canada and the US, political interest in new approaches to North America crosses partisan boundaries. Prime Minister Paul Martin has made clear his intention to reinvigorate Canada's relationship with the US as part of the broader strategy for strengthening Canada's influence in the world. Stephen Harper, the new leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, has called for a continental strategic partnership. And on and on and on. And then all this documentation that I've got, there's that one, there's his leader statement, there's the June report made to the 3 leaders of the 3 countries by their 9 cabinet ministers, 3 from each of the countries, reporting in 3 months on their success in the implementation of all that these guys had talked about in Waco, Texas. It's all in here. And David Emerson was one of the signatories. Pierre Pettigrew was a signatory. Anne McClellan was a signatory. 2 of them were defeated in the last election. You will remember Emerson crossed the floor. And he said, I don't know why everybody's so upset about me doing this. I'm just continuing the work I was doing before. And he was quite right. And you see, he sees nothing wrong with what he's doing. A lot of these people really believe, they think this is a great thing they're doing. For a very few, yeah, it's true. And I just want to impress on people, don't allow yourself to get trapped into this concept of strategic voting. Vote for the Liberals because we don't want the Conservatives to win. They're the same package. The same package. And I'm really tired of people running into this party and then over into this party because they think they can do something in there. It's the classic deception and exploitation of some really good people who get deceived and tricked as the Orwellian thought process manifests to trap people into working against themselves. So the conservatives and the liberals, and there's a whole history of all the things. There's no time for me to read all the stuff that Paul Martin talked about. And Harper, of course, a year later goes down. One of the things they've agreed to in this agreement is that every year they'll meet, the three leaders. So the last one was in March in Cancun. The next one is going to be in Kananaskis in Canada. And there was a meeting just happened in February with some of the less senior people. Condoleezza Rice was there. It's no good for our political parties. The NDP, the Bloc Québécois, by the way, is supporting the Amero. The Amero is a monetary instrument that is planned to be a common currency in North America. And they all, again, lie and tell us it's not happening. Well, it is. My information is it's already coined. It exists in a bank in, I forget the name of the bank now, in the United States. What is going to be the bank that controls the currency will probably be a new bank, or maybe the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, of course, is not federal. It's not accountable to the people. It's a conglomeration of private banks who rule. It will mean the end of our Bank of Canada. A primary platform of the Canadian Action Party is helping the people to understand the power for the people that exists in our treasure, our jewel of an instrument called the Bank of Canada, that delivered so much for a number of decades in this country, but has been used less and less since the 70s. The reason a lot of us say, why haven't they actually eliminated it from our statutes? There's a Bank of Canada Act that gives the authority to the feds and to the provinces to deliver for the people the needs financially in this country at no interest rate. And if there is any interest that goes on, it comes back to the people. That's been something we've been talking about forever, and is one of our major planks. The sovereignty and the control of your money is so important in a nation. Many financial people throughout the world have said throughout time, it doesn't matter who the government is, give me the control to issue your currency and I control everything. And that's a fundamental principle. And there have been people like Lincoln who have died. Even Jack Kennedy was about to do changes and to put some more sovereignty in their money system. So for those of us who understand about monetary reform, it's very important to recognize that this agreement that's changing North American area into a unified power source will eliminate totally that power of money, the sovereignty of money. And it's very, very significant to recognize that. Let me just maybe hit on a couple of things that maybe you can relate to that are flowing from this agreement, that are the nuts and bolts of the practical application of the arrangements. Because the principle basically is that all the resources of this area are to be used to benefit an elite economic few, and we, the people, are to be the serfs to deliver that economic boon. And our resources are not ours. They belong, these people can take them and do what they want. And the point of that is to create this powerful force that's going to have some mechanism to assert its force. And therefore, the military integration is extremely important. And we're totally integrated under NORAD already. You can see the application of the military totally away now from the Canadian way, where we're in Afghanistan and we have military leaders mimicking the language of the military leaders who are the aggressors, in the places of the Middle East. It's not the people's way. It's not what Canadians want, but it's happening because we've made arrangements. A binational planning agreement is a military agreement. It started in the year 2002. But the implementation, and there's so much I can tell you of the language, the slips that have happened where there's an acknowledgement that our military is totally integrated. We no longer have sovereignty about the decision of what we're going to do with our military. And the slips come out from once in a while from some politician. So that the military is to be the vehicle in the conquering of the world, and ours is to be used, our soldiers, our youth are now to die on the battlefields because the American people are making such a fuss about the numbers of theirs that are dying. And so we're being told ridiculous statements to justify sending our young people over to die, either to be killed there or to be, of course, exposed to the depleted uranium, which is killing everybody, and of course, which knows no boundaries. And then on top of that, to get you and me to accept this dramatic change in the way we live, the way we think, the things that we want, with our history and our way. We've had an incident occur that's been used, it's a 9/11 incident, the attack in New York, that's been used to compel us to agree to let happen the destruction of our civil liberties, to scare us into thinking that we have to do this thing, we have to give up our liberties. One of the insane statements made in one of the movies, one of the DVDs that's out, there's some woman in England is saying, well, yes, I have to give up my liberty in order to be free. And you know, it's quite shocking, but that's the doublespeak, you see, where people's minds are all screwed up. And so I'm going to end by just saying this quickly. When you really get into learning about and understanding what's going on, it can really scare you. And when you really get into the 9/11 truth movement and you pay attention to the evidence that's there, recognize that there's such compelling evidence to tell us the explanation they gave us is all wrong. That incident, over and over, these guys talk in different papers about, since 9/11, how important it is to do all these changes. That's the justification. And if you go to the Project of North America and you read the language in there, they talk about the need for another Pearl Harbor kind of thing in order to get the people to submit to all this, because if people really had a choice, you'd never do this. Not if we are informed and if we believe in democracy. And it's been said by the Trilateral Commission, the problem with the Western world is people are too well educated and there's an excess of democracy. Well, that's a concept, that's an ideology. It's not my ideology, it's not yours. You probably agree with me that you think people being informed and educated is important and that democracy matters and we should be able to have it and to enjoy it and to exercise it. So when you really look, and I really urge you to watch the variety of videos that are out there about the 9/11, because that evidence is so compelling to tell us we're justifying all these dramatic changes based on that incident, which has compelling evidence to say it's not the way they said it was, and it's a bad thing that happened there. And we have a right to know the real answers. We have a right to examine that, and then to say, we're not prepared to let these dramatic changes happen based on that terrible event, which is a trick, a deception of us on a massive scale. And most importantly, I want to say to you, when you really learn this stuff, and when you really watch those videos, and when you really come to understand it, it can make you feel really, really bad. It can make you fear, and it can make you panic. And I just want to remind you, that's the point. The power is in the fear. If you can be fearful, then you will be controlled. That's the trick. Understand that. And so I'm saying to you, don't let the fear overwhelm you. Don't let the fear dismantle you. Stand up and say no. I didn't have time to talk about some of the things, like the compulsory vaccination that's happening in the United States of 9 and 11-year-old girls for cervical cancer, happening in England. It's interesting that a lot of these countries all doing the identical things. There's a plan, a bigger plan out there. You can say no. And the governor, and I think it was Texas, it was either Texas or California, that on his own unilaterally imposed mandatory vaccination of 9-year-old girls who might be sexually active to prevent cervical cancer. Well, first of all, cervical cancer is not a communicable disease. And secondly, what 9 or 11-year-old is sexually active? I mean, give me a break. There's something really wrong. Again, use your common sense. Go to your natural instincts. Realize when someone comes to say to you, you're going to have to have your child be vaccinated, say as an example, say no. Don't submit to the identification of you as a dissident or as a deviant. That's the language they're already talking, because you say no. You still live in a place of the world where you have the right to say no. I'm saying to you, exercise that right. Exercise your instinctive capacity that directs you. There's your strength. There is our strength. We can say no. We must say no. And we will say no. Okay, I'll take some questions. Oh, those are perfectly good, really great points. Thank you for that. It's very interesting that, yes, China as the emerging power bloc could become the powerhouse, and that's one of the concerns that the United States has in terms of exercising its growth and its need to have Canada especially on side and Mexico for this power here. And when you recognize that the trillions of dollars that the United States is in debt, and most of it is to China, it's like somebody said to me, what if they call in the note? You know, and so there's real financial economic activity that's happening out there that's part of this process. And it's a great big something, and so then you say, well, what can I as an ordinary individual little guy do? The individual little guys are what makes up humanity, and all over the world people are talking like we're talking, even in China, and all we can, and that's why I have to say we have to bring it back to home and say, all right, understand and learn what's going on, recognize your power, which comes from inside you, and every other person around, it's the energy amongst us. And then we merge together, we go together. And we have to start at home. We start in our own individual home, in our own individual town. We have a little talk like this, and then we build. And we don't let deflection happen to us, whether it's a non-governmental organization or it's another political party that's going to lie to us. And we say we have to have a direction. We have to be on the same plane. And the Canadian Action Party, from my point of view, is no more than a vehicle for the people. It's a party that's exposing this stuff and is saying, if you understand what I'm talking about, we have a clear direction. We're clearly saying, abrogate NAFTA, because it's one of the foundations for North America, and stop the implementation. It has to be stopped. It's no good to say, well, we want to just talk about it. We want to just humanize it, which was the language of the NDP some time ago. The members, I'm talking about the leadership in these other parties, the members in probably every single party in this country, the human beings, who are informed, they don't want this, but the structure within parties is such that the power doesn't percolate up from the people, and we're small enough that we can still be a party that says the words of our convention that formulate what I talk about are the power, and this is a vehicle. If you want on, we can take back control of this country, and we're not going to, so long as we keep electing people that aren't going to say, put a stop to this. You've got the Bloc Québécois who wants the Amero, and you've got the Bloc Québécois whose agenda, as we all know, is to get out of Canada, and they would like Canada to dissolve, and it's so insane that we've got the Bloc Québécois as a major opposition force there sitting with the Conservative government, or it could be the Liberals, it wouldn't matter, that are running this country. So you've got a major mainstream party that wants the North American Union, you've got the Bloc Québécois that wants Canada to end. It's pretty awful. And then you've got the NDP who didn't say anything about this through 2 elections. And when I would talk about it on the campaign trail, like some of them would just blink. And in fairness to a lot of those elected people, it's true, a lot of information is withheld from them. But I don't excuse them. I don't excuse them because their job is to learn this stuff and to inform us. That's their job. That's why we put them there. So I refuse to let any of them off the hook by saying, well, our leaders won't let us. And of course the leaders crack the whip, because if they speak out too strongly, they'll lose. They won't be allowed to be a candidate again. You have to understand, under our system, the leader of every party has the total authority to decide who's going to be the candidate. If the leader does not sign the consent form for the candidate, that candidate does not run. Absolutely, I can relate that agreement to this process. Section 3 of the TILMA specifically says there shall be no, what's the word? There shall be no opposition. There shall be no impediment, basically. But there's another word I just can't. No obstacles. Obstacles is the word. There shall be no obstacles to this agreement. And the TILMA, in effect, is an agreement that puts the icing on the cake to fill the holes that were still left in NAFTA, which left some authority in the people because there still was some. You see, you have to understand that all these agreements, these international agreements, were being, quote, negotiated And there'd be people come together and they'd say, well, I want this out, I want agriculture excluded, I want energy excluded, I want the environment excluded. So all right, for today, this is as far as we go. Tomorrow we get together, and bit by bit and bit, more and more was chipped away, even in the international agreements like the NAFTA. Under the World Trade Organization, with the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, all these structures. What's really bad for us as Canadians is that we've had two premiers, one in British Columbia, one in Alberta, who have done the dirty work big time for the Canadian Council of Chief Executives, who have said in their document it's very important for us to work with the other levels of government at the provincial and at the state and at the municipal level to get them on side with this ideology. And there's nobody who has a greater commitment to that ideology than Gordon Campbell and Ralph Klein. And that TILMA agreement essentially makes illegal the operation of government to act in any way, in any matter, in the economy, in the social affairs, in the structure of our provinces that is in the interest of people, if that interest of people interferes with the profit of the corporations. So goodbye to your hospital, goodbye to your any kind of a program that you have for employment, goodbye to your medical care, hello big time to privatization, private clinics, dental, medical, schools, universities, everything. Because it's the same principle as operated in NAFTA. They would say, yes, you can go ahead and tell us that we're not allowed to use ethanol in our gas, but if you do, we're going to sue you, and you're going to pay billions of dollars. And that's what happened in Canada. Some of you will remember a challenge under NAFTA. And we saw our government, instead of standing up and fighting for us, they just capitulated and paid billions of dollars out, and then they turned around and lied and said we lied. We didn't really know what we were talking about when we put a ban on this type of gas because we understood it to be carcinogenic. And no, it isn't carcinogenic. So you had that as an example of the leaders of parties who get so sucked in by the power pushing them from the corporate affair that they abandon their own knowledge and understanding of the public good. It's really that bad. So TILMA is very bad, and I'm glad you asked that question, because the point of TILMA, right now it's those two provinces, but the intention in there, and they say in there, this agreement is open for joinder by other people, and other provinces of Canada are looking at it. I understand Saskatchewan, my information is that they've made a decision no. I understand Ontario is really looking at it seriously. I understand a couple of states in the United States are really excited about it and want to join. So you have this sphere on this corner of North America working to implement that integration process, you see, and to have it under this regime that the corporate entitlement to the resources of the world for their benefit rules. There must be no regulations like protection of your health, like the length of time that a vaccine is to be tested to make sure it's safe. There are to be no such protections, because that slows down profit. It's that bad. Now, the good news is that there are a number of states in the United States, contrary to our weak-kneed, limp-wristed, pussyfooting provinces, who are saying no to the North American Union. This is not good. We don't want it. We're not going to have it. And I have one letter here. It's from Montana legislature. I understand there are as many as 16. I'm not sure how many have actually passed, but there are many, many of the states who are passing legislation like this. It's a resolution of the Senate and the House of Representatives of Montana State opposing any effort to implement a trinational political governmental entity among the United States, Canada, and Mexico. This resolution opposes the Security and Prosperity Partnership of North America. It opposes initiatives pursued in conjunction with this partnership that threaten the sovereignty of the U.S. It opposes the North American Union, and it opposes the North American Free Trade Agreement superhighway system. Did you know about the Super NAFTA highway that's coming up? Now, the good news on that front, first of all, let me tell you what it was, for those of you who don't know. Again, it's a transportation corridor coming up from the Mexican border to the U.S., which has its beginning down in Mexico to avoid the ports in California, where there's big-time union agreement, where good jobs and good work happens, that's expensive to the, as costly for the corporations who want to use that port. So they go down to this other port, it's down in Mexico, and the highway begins there, and it comes right up through Texas and right up to Canada, ends up in Winnipeg, and then cuts across our country over to Vancouver and over to Toronto, I think is as far as it goes. Just a second. And the people down in Texas, it's to be about 4 to 5 football fields wide, and it means massive expropriation. Now, isn't this interesting? Governments are not allowed to expropriate for anything for the benefit of the people, but the corporations can use the governments to expropriate for the benefit of the corporations. Something's kind of wrong with this picture. The good news on that front is that I'm informed by a Texas radio show host who interviewed me just a couple of days ago that because of their work against the Super NAFTA highway, that the construction has been stalled. It's been slowed down. And most people in Canada don't even know about the Super NAFTA highway. But that's an important something. So the people down there are more informed because there's more alternative media, such as as this investigative reporter who's sponsoring this show is doing. There's more of that big time happening in the United States. Even some mainstream media, like Lou Dobbs on CNN, is talking about it. Silence in Canada. So, you know, we've got states that have some guts, have got some jam. There's still some leadership that cares about people, human beings. It's our shame to learn that as Canadians, we've been leading in the implementation of the integration process behind closed doors, and that we have no formalized opposition, and that the non-governmental organizations of activists that should be leading us, who have all been contained, especially since 9/11, are failing us. No political leadership in the mainstream parties. And of the other alternative parties, I challenge you, please go out and read and find out who is saying what. Go where you want, but please remember, this vehicle exists of the Canadian Action Party, and together, it's not for me. I don't even want to be doing this. But I can't stand it that nobody else is talking about it. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to say some things to you today. And I can't quite not do what I'm doing because I've just spent 3 days with a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, and I have a granddaughter who's 7, and when she's 9, I don't want her to be forced vaccinated against cervical cancer when I don't think she's going to be sexually active, and I know it's not a communicable disease. Yes, well, of course, the Atlantica is the same concept as the Pacifica, and that's been going on. Those kind of discussions have been happening for some time, years, actually, 10, 15, 20 years. These forces just didn't emerge after 9/11. They've been around. The 9/11 was simply the catalyst to give them the impetus to really do it to us. So that's, I mean, it's happening there as well. And the integration. You see, David Orchard did a good job many years ago talking about the loss of Canada. He talked about the history of the number of efforts, at least 4, of the invasion of Canada by the United States. And they were always by the forces of the power blocks of industry. And others have talked about, Pierre Burton, wrote a book about the transportation, the railroad system. And you're aware that the railroads are being ripped up everywhere. The east-west efforts to join Canada as a nation, to keep us connected, are all being removed because the logic of the geography is north-south. Well, that's why we, Canadian Action Party, says it's important for people to learn about money, how it's created, how it's used, how it can be used for the benefit of the people, as compared to having everything dominated and run by financial institutions that operate within industry, because they're all connected, financial and the branches, such as you're describing, the breakup and the expansion, more and more concentration in the hands of a few, and more by a few, dominated over all these different branches. So we have to understand and learn that the sovereignty that exists that comes right back to money, because all these corporations have to function with money and their power and their control and how they use it. And that gets your question about corporations and the person. It's true that nations have granted corporations the license to write, the entitlement to operate. It's true that the corporations have been given the status of a person, and that's one of the things that we talked about that was wrong in the NAFTA, that corporations have rights that are larger than the ordinary citizen, and that's expanded into the North American Union concept. And we have to say no to that. We have to say we don't want that as people, as individuals, you and me sitting here. We have to acknowledge and recognize that the fundamentals of a democratic structure in an organization is that the individual single human being is as important as every other individual single human being, and that we're more important, that we are what matters. Corporations are structures and entities that have been invented, and it's all right to have them, any other structure that's there to serve us, not that we are here to serve them. That's the fundamental difference. So we have to keep reminding ourselves about that and to recognize that the power is all going over there and we're their servant, and we have to say, no, no, no. That's not the way it's right to be. And we're going to change the rules back so that those entities are going to be allowed to exist only insofar as they serve them. Go to your small bank. First of all, can you even find your small bank anymore? And when you do go there, how easy is it to get them to do any service to you? They're off into the big gambling casino of the international market where they're playing with the money for their own to be gamblers out there, instead of being a financial institution set up there to serve the needs of human beings. So it's a very fundamental, simple point and concept. We come first. We as human beings, as people, we come first, and anything else that we have is there to serve us. That's a totally different ideology than that which runs the world now, which says the corporations exist and we serve them. The fundamental question any politician has to ask is, when I make a decision about this particular law that we're going to implement, whose interest is it going to serve? And that's the test. Is it going to serve the people, or is it going to serve this or this or this or this? And if you're a politician that believes in the common good, believes in public duty, which are essential cores to democracy, you have to say no to what's going on now. And we no longer even have bureaucrats that believe in the public. It used to be that the bureaucracy in Canada was pretty darn good. They really understood the public duty, and they really did protect. Now, you see, they move back and forth amongst industry, and they take the ideology of industry, that everything is to serve industry, not the people. And so they've lost that concept. We have to take it back, and we can. Question back there. But your point is well made, and it addresses another fundamental point which the Canadian Action Party recognizes, and that's, what can we do to implement a form of real democracy for the people? We have to fundamentally change the structure of our system, and there are places in the world that have forms of direct democracy that put the power back in the hands of the people, like in Switzerland. They have referenda. The citizens under their law have the right and the capacity to command a referenda on any significant issue and to know about it and to say it's not going to happen, and then the government can't do it. So we have said in our party, we're not just looking at, but we're very serious about dramatically restructuring, because you're quite right, you see, whether it's a provincial level or whether it's a federal level, it doesn't matter right now which one of those parties that you put in, because they're going to do the same thing to us. And so we have to have a change in the structure. They're irrelevant to us right now because they're not even talking about this stuff in Parliament. It doesn't even get there. It's all being driven by an outside force. And Harper just announced the Competitiveness Council of 16 major people from the corporate area who direct him. Before we quit, I want to read you some of the names of the companies. And so the parliamentarians, in fairness to them, although I don't forgive them, they don't get a lot of information, but that's not good enough. And so the structure has to dramatically change, absolutely fundamentally dramatically change. And go and do what you can with your favorite party and make your demands on them, and they'll have their reasons why they don't do such and such, but it's abominable. I didn't find out about the TILMA until about, I guess it's 3 months ago. And I said, where were the NDP? Where was the Green Party? Where were the non-governmental organizations? Somebody must have had some leak from the Liberal Party of what's going on. Maybe even a lot of the Liberal Party MPs, or what do we call them in the provinces? MLAs knew about it. But there have to be some sort of leaks. We find out a lot of this stuff because somebody leaked something. The whistleblowers, very important, the whistleblowers. And it's just not acceptable at all, that we've got a structure with elected people from the NDP, nobody elected from the Greens, but they're trying to be there, and they speak nothing about this. And actually, some of my information is that the provincial Greens support Tilma. Might check that out, I'm not really sure on that. But then when I was at a meeting getting some information about the Tilma, that's where some representatives from the NDP were there learning some information about it. And I'm saying, something wrong with this picture? Why can I, a party that has no money, operates on volunteer work, why can I get this information? None of the people who are really thinking about this stuff and concerned and working in these areas have resources, except the volunteer resources from human beings who are saying, I as an individual can't stand what's going on and I'm going to do some little something. And that kind of some little something is percolating across this country. I have to tell you that I've got a DVD back there called The North American Union. It's free, please take it. There's another one of some speeches I did after Terror Storm. It's not a very good one because the introduction doesn't tell why I'm there. But still, if you want it, take it. The DVD on the North American Union is a documentary produced in the United States of all the people, Lou Dobbs, congressman, various people talking against the North American Union. There's only one Canadian politician that has a space on there. Guess who that is? It's me, this little tiny party. I mean, I'm proud that they used some of the stuff I've said, but it's again an awful attack, a disgraceful situation that we don't have anybody else in Canada that's bigger than we are, that this documentary could go to for some information. They're glad to find out, oh my God, you guys and somebody up in Canada, wherever you are up there, you guys too, you don't want this. Say, oh, that's good to know that. We just thought, we're so glad that you're going to join. You don't want it either. There still is a lot of ignorance about Canada, but the fact is they're grateful, extremely grateful that this tiny party exists, and we're getting a lot of hits on our website and a lot of exposure down there. So it's me and all the members of the Canadian Action Party, of ourselves, doing some little something in these little tiny ways, but it's percolating, 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 and that's the revolution of the world. Not as well, the United States is bankrupt, and we've tied our tail to the United States. So
it's declared bankrupt.
The United States hasn't declared bankruptcy, but you look at the trillions and trillions of dollars that it's in debt to, as I said, to China. If they ever call it in, it's gone. That's one of their big fears. And one of the power usages of the United States going after anybody who dares to jump from the US dollar in Europe and go to the euro. It's one of the reasons they attacked Saddam Hussein, of course. He was going to do that. Iran has done it. A number of those countries are doing it because they're concerned about the value of the US dollar. Kinds of things. I think we have to end. It's a little after 3 and it's very tight with the schedule. And thank you very much for coming.